Princess Nari stumbled through the dark forest, her once royal garments tattered and dirty. 3 Earth days had passed since her escape pod crash-landed on this backwater planet. The trees loomed overhead, strange and threatening compared to the crystalline vegetation of her homeworld. "Status report," she whispered to her wrist device, the last functioning piece of her technology. "Life support failing," came the mechanical reply. "Humanoid form stability at 37%. Warning, cellular degradation accelerating." Nari leaned against a tree trunk, breathing heavily. The human disguise taxed her energy reserves severely, but she couldn't reveal her true form here. Earth was classified as a pre-contact world, strictly off-limits to her people, except for authorized research teams. The irony wasn't lost on her. A princess of the mighty Stellarid Empire, hiding on a primitive planet from her own people, she touched the small royal insignia hidden beneath her makeshift Earth clothes. Just 2 weeks ago, she had been preparing for her coronation ceremony. Then came the explosions, the screams, the sight of her parents being dragged away by General Dawn's soldiers. Her bodyguard Q had shoved her into an emergency pod moments before rebel forces breached the palace's inner chambers. "Find somewhere safe," he had told her. "I'll find you when it's over." But the pod's navigation system had malfunctioned, sending her spiraling toward the restricted blue planet instead of the nearest diplomatic outpost. A distant light flickered through the trees. Civilization. She needed food and shelter if she was going to survive long enough for rescue. Pushing herself forward, Nari followed the light, eventually finding herself at the edge of a small human settlement. Signs and buildings identified it as some sort of educational institution. "University," her translator supplied. "Perfect." Young humans of similar apparent age would make it easier to blend in until she could repair her communicator. On the outskirts of campus, she found an unoccupied storage shed and collapsed inside. Her body needed rest to maintain the molecular stability of her human form. As darkness claimed her, Nari wondered if anyone was even looking for her, or if she was truly abandoned. Taehyun adjusted his glasses as he stared at the readout on his custom-built spectrometer. Something was wrong with the data. This was the 3rd night in a row he'd picked up strange energy fluctuations from the North Woods. "That's impossible," he muttered, tapping the screen. The patterns resembled nothing in Earth's natural electromagnetic spectrum. If his calculations were correct, something in those woods was emitting radiation, with properties he'd only theorized in his quantum physics thesis. His roommate Junho poked his head into their shared apartment's spare room, which Taehyun had converted into a makeshift lab. "Still playing with your star gadgets?" Junho asked, yawning. "It's almost 3 a.m. "This isn't stellar radiation," Taehyun replied, not looking up. "It's something else, something local." "Maybe it's aliens," Junho joked, making spooky fingers. "Coming to abduct all the physics nerds." "Very funny," Taehyun said, but something about the energy signature did remind him of theoretical models for faster-than-light travel. Not that he'd admit that to Junho. His roommate already thought he was obsessed enough with space. When Junho left, Taehyun packed his equipment into his backpack. The university's lab had better tools, but Professor Park had rejected his request to investigate these readings, calling them equipment malfunctions. If the university wouldn't help, he'd check it out himself. The night air was cool as Taehyun headed toward the North Woods. His handheld detector beeped softly, the signal growing stronger as he ventured deeper between the trees. After 20 minutes of walking, the beeping became rapid and insistent. "It should be right here," he muttered, scanning the area. Nothing seemed unusual, just trees, underbrush, and the small maintenance shed where groundskeepers stored equipment. Then, he noticed the shed door was slightly open, a faint bluish light pulsing from within. Heart pounding, Taehyun approached slowly. Was this dangerous? Should he call someone? But who would believe him? Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open. Inside, curled on the floor, was a girl about his age. Her clothes were strange, torn in places but made of material that seemed to shimmer slightly. More alarming was the blue glow emanating from her skin, pulsing erratically like a failing light bulb. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Are you okay?" Her eyes snapped open, striking violet eyes that definitely weren't typical for humans. She scrambled backward, pressing against the wall. "Stay back!" she hissed, her voice carrying a strange accent he couldn't place. "I'm not going to hurt you," Tae-hyun said, raising his hands. "You need help." "You can't help me," she replied, but her voice weakened as the blue glow flickered more violently. "You're the source of the energy readings," he realized aloud. "What are you?" Before she could answer, her body convulsed, and the human appearance seemed to waver, briefly revealing glimpses of iridescent skin beneath. Tae-hyun's scientific mind raced with implications, but his humanity responded first. "Whatever you are, you're injured," he said firmly. "Let me help you." The girl looked at him with those strange violet eyes, studying him intensely before the fight seemed to leave her body. "My name is Nari," she whispered as her disguise stabilized, "and I am very far from home." Without hesitation, Tae-hyun offered his hand. This was either the greatest discovery in human history or the beginning of something terrible. Either way, he couldn't leave her alone in the woods to die. Tae-hyun's apartment wasn't much, a small two-bedroom unit he shared with Junho, who thankfully was visiting his parents for the weekend. Perfect timing considering he now had an alien princess hiding in his room. "Drink this," he said, handing Nari a cup of water. She sniffed it suspiciously before taking a small sip. "Your hydrogen oxide is acceptable," she managed, her voice still weak. The blue glow beneath her skin had dimmed to a faint pulse, visible only when she moved suddenly. "Most people just call it water," Tae-hyun replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite his racing heart. An actual alien was sitting on his bed, wearing his oversized sweatshirt and looking simultaneously terrified and regal. "How did you find me?" Nari asked, eyes darting around his room, taking in the star charts on the walls and the telescope by the window. "I built a device that detects unusual energy signatures. Whatever it is you're doing to look human, it gives off readings unlike anything I've seen." He gestured to her shimmering skin. "Is that some kind of hologram?" Nari looked almost offended. "Holograms are primitive technology. This is molecular restructuring. My natural form would be unsuitable for Earth's atmosphere and gravity, and would cause panic among your kind." "So you're really not human," Tae-hyun whispered, the reality sinking in. "Where are you from?" Nari stood up shakily and walked to his star map. With surprising precision, she pointed to a star that was barely visible on his chart. "There, though you wouldn't have proper designation for it. My home system is beyond your current observational capabilities." "Why are you here? Is this some kind of first contact mission?" Nari's face darkened. "No, Earth is classified as a pre-contact world. My presence here is accidental and temporary." She turned to face him directly. "I need to repair my communication device to contact my loyal subjects." "Your loyal subjects?" Tae-hyun repeated. "What exactly are you?" "I am Princess Nari, heir to the Stellarid Empire," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "Or I was, until the rebellion." Tae-hyun sat back in his chair, trying to process this. Not just an alien, but alien royalty. "A rebellion? Like someone took over your government?" "General Dawn and his supporters attacked the royal palace during my pre-coronation ceremony. My parents were captured. I escaped only because of my God's sacrifice." Her voice remained controlled, but Tae-hyun noticed her hands trembling. "My emergency pod was damaged during escape. It should have taken me to a diplomatic station, but instead, she gestured around her. I landed here." "I'm sorry," Tae-hyun said, not knowing what else to offer. "That sounds terrible." Nari looked at him strangely. "Your sympathy is unexpected. Our intelligence reports described humans as aggressive, selfish, creatures with limited capacity for empathy." "Well, your intelligence reports need updating," Tae-hyun said, a bit offended. "We're not perfect, but we're not monsters." Before Nari could respond, she doubled over in pain, the blue glow flaring brightly beneath her skin. "What's happening?" Tae-hyun asked, rushing to her side. "Molecular degradation," she gasped. "My body can't maintain this form indefinitely without proper nutrients." "What do you need? Food? Medicine?" She shook her head. "Elements your planet likely doesn't have. I brought emergency supplies, but they were depleted days ago. Tae-hyun ran a hand through his hair, thinking quickly. I'm a physics student. If you can tell me the molecular structure of what you need, maybe I can synthesize something similar in the university lab. Nari looked up at him, surprise evident in her violet eyes. You would do this? For an alien stranger? I would do it for anyone who needed help, he said simply. Then added with a small smile, though helping an alien princess is definitely a first. For a moment, Nari's regal facade cracked, and genuine gratitude showed through. I misjudged. Perhaps I misjudged all humans. Working together through the night, Nari described the compounds her body needed, while Tae-hyun translated them into Earth equivalents. His years of study in astrophysics and chemistry were finally proving useful outside of academics. This might work, he said around dawn, showing her his notes. I can access the chemistry lab tomorrow. If I combine these elements in the right proportions, it would stabilize my form temporarily, she finished, studying his calculations with surprising understanding. You're more scientifically advanced than our report suggested. Maybe your empire should talk to us instead of just observing from afar, Tae-hyun suggested. Nari's expression closed off. That's not my decision to make. There are protocols. Your species hasn't achieved certain technological milestones required for official contact. Like what? Faster than light travel? She nodded. Among other things. Yet here you are, he pointed out. By accident, not design. But something in her voice had softened. As morning light filtered through the window, Tae-hyun realized he hadn't slept at all, yet felt more awake than ever. We need to figure out a cover story for you. You can't just hide in my apartment forever. A cover story. How about this? You're an exchange student who lost her luggage and documents. You need a place to stay while waiting for replacements. Nari considered this. Will others believe such a story? People generally believe what makes sense to them. An exchange student with problems is more believable than an alien princess on the run. For the first time, Nari's lips curved into something resembling a smile. You're cleverer than I expected, Tae-hyun, and you're nicer than I expected for someone who thought humans were aggressive, selfish creatures, he countered. Perhaps we've both been victims of incomplete information, she admitted. As they continued planning, Tae-hyun found himself wondering what he'd gotten himself into. Helping an alien princess hide from intergalactic pursuers wasn't exactly covered in his university coursework. Yet somehow, looking at Nari's determined face as she struggled to understand Earth customs, he couldn't bring himself to regret finding her in those woods. Whatever happened next, the universe had suddenly become much bigger and more complicated than he'd ever imagined, and somehow he was now part of something extraordinary. No, you can't wear the lab coat to class, Tae-hyun said, gently taking the white coat from Nari's hands. Only professors and lab assistants wear these. 2 weeks had passed since he'd found the alien princess in the storage shed. With his help, Nari had settled into a convincing routine as an exchange student. She now wore borrowed clothes from Tae-hyun's cousin who had visited last summer, though she still insisted the fabrics were primitively constructed compared to the self-adjusting materials from her world. But it's practical, she argued, eyeing the coat with approval. Multiple pockets for tools and specimens. Trust me on this, Tae-hyun replied, hanging the coat back up. We're trying to blend in, not stand out. Blending in remained a daily challenge. The compound Tae-hyun had synthesized in the university lab stabilized Nari's human form, but couldn't eliminate certain oddities. Her slight accent, her formal way of speaking, and her tendency to stare in wonder at things humans took for granted, all required constant explanations. You're from Switzerland, he would tell curious classmates. Their education system is different. Today marked Nari's first official day attending classes with Tae-hyun. They had spent hours creating fake documentation with help from his friend, Minho, who asked no questions but gave knowing looks that suggested he thought Nari was Tae-hyun's secret girlfriend. Remember, Tae-hyun coached as they walked across campus, if someone asks where you're from, I'm an exchange student from Switzerland studying comparative physics, Nari recited. My documents were lost when my luggage was misplaced during the flight transfer in Seoul. And if they ask about your family? She sighed. My parents are environmental researchers currently working in a remote location with poor communication access. The morning went surprisingly well. Nari sat quietly beside Taehyun in his quantum mechanics lecture, though he noticed her writing notes that corrected the professor's equations. He nudged her when she started muttering about outdated theoretical frameworks. Their understanding is at least 3 centuries behind, she whispered. Yes, but we don't tell them that, he whispered back. At lunch they sat under a tree away from crowds. Nari still struggled with earth food, finding most of it excessively flavored or texturally confusing. She had developed a particular fondness for plain rice and steamed vegetables, which Taehyun now packed daily. Have you made any progress with the communicator? He asked between bites of his sandwich. Nari pulled out what looked like a smooth stone from her pocket. To human eyes it appeared ordinary, but Taehyun now knew it contained technology beyond Earth's capabilities. The damage is significant, she said. I need components that don't exist in your technology stores. What if we built them? I could help. Nari looked skeptical. With what? Your copper wires and silicon chips? I need quantum-entangled transmitters. Maybe we could adapt something, Taehyun suggested. I've been reading about superconductors in the advanced physics lab. They might have materials we could borrow. Nari's eyes widened. Borrow? You mean steal? Not steal exactly. Just use when no one's looking, he said, feeling his face. Flush. Before meeting Nari, he'd never even considered breaking university rules. You would risk punishment to help me? She seemed genuinely confused. Taehyun shrugged. What are they going to do? Expel me for helping an alien princess save her. Empire? For once Nari laughed, a sound he'd rarely heard from her. It transformed her usually serious face, making her seem less like royalty and more like the college student she was pretending to be. That afternoon, while Taehyun attended his advanced statistical analysis class, Nari sat in. Professor Lee was discussing patterns in seemingly random datasets when Nari's hand unexpectedly shot up. Yes, the exchange student, Professor Lee called, surprised. Your analysis overlooks multidimensional variables, Nari stated confidently. If you applied a 7th-degree polynomial to account for quantum fluctuations, the pattern would reveal itself clearly. The classroom fell silent. Professor Lee adjusted his glasses, looking both irritated and intrigued. That's a rather unconventional approach. Would you care to demonstrate? To Taehyun's horror and amazement, Nari walked to the board and began writing equations that definitely weren't in any Earth textbook. For 10 minutes, she filled the board with calculations before stepping back. There, she said. The pattern emerges when viewed through a non-linear framework. Professor Lee stared at the board, mouth slightly open. The other students looked confused, but the professor slowly nodded. This is remarkable. Where did you study before coming here? Switzerland. Taehyun cut in quickly. They have a very progressive physics program. After class, Professor Lee asked Nari to consider joining his research team, while Taehyun pulled her away with promises to think about it. You can't just show off alien math in class, he hissed once they were alone. But his approach was fundamentally flawed, Nari protested. I was helping. Help less spectacularly next time, Taehyun groaned. We're supposed to be keeping a low profile. That evening in Taehyun's apartment, they spread components across his desk. Bits of electronics he'd collected, along with smaller pieces Nari had salvaged from her crashed pod during a secret night expedition back to the woods. Hold this, she instructed, passing him what looked like a small crystal. As soon as it touched his hand, it glowed faintly blue. Whoa, he breathed. What is it? A power cell. Very weak now, but enough to test our prototype. She worked with precise movements, connecting Earth technology to alien components in ways Taehyun struggled to follow. As she worked, Taehyun watched. Her face concentrated, focused, yet somehow more relaxed than when he'd first found her. The regal stiffness had softened during her time on Earth. You know, he said quietly, for someone who thought humans were primitive, you're adapting pretty well. Nari didn't look up from her work, but her lips curved slightly. Your species is surprising. Limited in technology, but creative in thinking. You approach problems more differently. Is that a compliment? An observation, she replied, but her smile widened. Though I admit, not all human customs are as pointless as I initially thought. High praise from alien royalty, Taehyun laughed. Later, that night, with their prototype transmitter failing its third test, Nari's shoulders slumped in rare defeat. It's hopeless with these materials. Taehyun put a hand on her shoulder, something he wouldn't have dared do weeks ago. We'll figure it out. Tomorrow we'll try Professor Kim's lab. His quantum computing research might have what we need. Nari looked at him with those strange violet eyes. Why are you helping me? Really? I've brought nothing but complication to your life. Taehyun considered this. Why was he turning his life upside down for her? Maybe because it's the right thing to do. Maybe because helping you is the most important thing I could possibly be doing. He smiled. Or maybe because this beats working on my thesis any day. For a moment, they just looked at each other, a human student and an alien princess, both far from where they'd expected to be. Then Nari did something surprising. She reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you, she said simply. Outside the window, stars twinkled in the night sky. Somewhere up there was Nari's home, a place Taehyun could barely imagine. Yet, sitting here in his small apartment, working on impossible technology with an alien princess who was quickly becoming his friend, the universe somehow felt a little less vast and a little more connected. The university cafe buzzed with the usual afternoon crowd. Taehyun sipped his coffee, while Nari poked suspiciously at a chocolate muffin, still uncertain about Earth's sweeter foods. 1 month into her stay on Earth, and small moments like these had become surprisingly normal. The transmitter needs just one more component, Nari said quietly. The signal amplifier we built is working, but not strong enough to reach beyond your solar system. Taehyun was about to respond when the cafe door opened. 2 people walked in, a tall man and a woman in crisp business attire. Something about them immediately caught his attention. Their movements were too precise, their posture too perfect. Nari tensed beside him. Don't look at them, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Who are they? Taehyun asked, keeping his eyes down. Hunters, she breathed. From home. The pair scanned the room with calculating eyes before taking a seat near the door. They didn't order anything, just sat perfectly still, watching. How did they find you? Taehyun asked, fighting the urge to stare. I don't know. Perhaps they tracked my pod's energy signature. Her hands trembled slightly. We need to leave now. They gathered their things casually, trying not to draw attention. As they stood to leave, Taehyun accidentally knocked over his coffee cup. The crash seemed impossibly loud. Both newcomers turned sharply, their eyes locking onto Nari. For a split second, Taehyun swore their irises glinted metallic blue. Go, Nari hissed. Side door. They pushed through the crowd toward the cafe's secondary exit. Behind them, the 2 strangers rose in perfect unison. Out in the busy campus courtyard, Taehyun grabbed Nari's hand. My lab. We can hide there. They weaved through students trying to look casual while moving quickly. Taehyun risked a glance back. The hunters followed at a measured pace, never running but somehow still closing the distance. They won't stop, Nari said as they rushed up the science building stairs. They're not fully organic. Enhanced beings programmed for one purpose, to find and eliminate me. The physics lab was empty when they burst in. Taehyun locked the door behind them, knowing it would hardly slow down whatever was pursuing them. We need a plan, he said, trying to keep his voice steady despite his pounding heart. Nari's eyes darted around the lab. Your equipment, the electromagnetic pulse generator for your thesis project. Where is it? Taehyun pointed to a large device in the corner. It's not finished. The power supply isn't stable. It doesn't need to be finished. Just functional. She moved toward it with purpose. Their neural systems are vulnerable to electromagnetic disruption. Understanding dawned on Taehyun. You want to short-circuit them? Precisely. Her royal training showed in moments like these, calm under pressure, mind racing through solutions. How quickly can you get it working? Tae-hyun was already connecting. Cables. 3 minutes if we're lucky. A gentle knock at the door made them both freeze. Princess Nari, came a perfectly modulated voice. By authority of Acting Regent Dawn, you are commanded to surrender yourself for return to the Stellarid. Empire. Nari's face hardened. Keep working, she whispered to Tae-hyun. Louder, she replied, I recognize no authority in the traitor Dawn. The door handle jiggled. Then, with frightening ease, the metal began to warp. They're melting the lock, Tae-hyun gasped, working faster. 60 more seconds! The door burst open. The two hunters stood perfectly still in the doorway, their human disguises now slightly less convincing, skin too smooth, movements too fluid. The human is irrelevant to our mission, the male hunter stated flatly. Step aside and you will not be harmed. Tae-hyun moved protectively in front of Nari. She's not going anywhere. The female hunter tilted her head slightly. Curious. Our intelligence indicated humans prioritize self-preservation. Your behavior is inconsistent with this data. Your data is incomplete, Tae-hyun replied, edging toward the pulse generator. We're also stubborn, loyal, and really bad at following orders. The hunters stepped forward in perfect synchronization. Resistance is illogical. We are designed for capture. You cannot escape. Nari stepped up beside Tae-hyun. You were designed by the Empire's engineers. The same engineers who taught me everything they knew. The hunters paused, processing this information. Now! Nari shouted. Tae-hyun slammed his hand down on the generator's activation switch. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, a high-pitched whine filled the room as the device powered up. The hunters moved with blinding speed, but the pulse fired first. An invisible wave rippled through the lab. Both hunters froze mid-step, their bodies convulsing as blue energy crackled across their skin. Their stabilizers are failing, Nari explained as the hunters' human forms flickered, briefly revealing metallic skeletons beneath pseudo-flesh. But this won't hold them for long, the female hunter's voice distorted into a mechanical screech. Secondary systems activating, adapting to localized disruption. We need to go, Tae-hyun urged, grabbing his backpack. What about the transmitter parts? Leave them. We need new ones anyway. Nari was already moving toward the back exit. They'll have called for backup. More will come. They fled across campus, staying to crowded areas where the hunters would be forced to maintain their disguises. Tae-hyun led them through shortcuts he'd discovered during late-night study sessions, between buildings, through the library's basement, finally emerging near the student apartments. We can't go back to your place, Nari said, catching her breath in the shelter of a delivery entrance. It's the first place they'll look. Tae-hyun nodded, thinking quickly. My friend Minho's family has a cabin about an hour from here. He mentioned they're not using it this semester. As darkness fell, they borrowed Junho's car with a hastily written note, promising to explain later. The drive to the cabin was tense, both of them constantly checking the rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. The cabin was small but secluded, surrounded by pine trees that cast long shadows in the moonlight. Once inside, Tae-hyun secured all the windows and doors, while Nari checked her disguise in a small mirror. My molecular stability is weakening, she admitted, showing him the blue glow that was more pronounced than usual beneath her skin. The stress accelerates the degradation. Tae-hyun emptied his backpack on the kitchen table, equipment he'd grabbed from the lab, plus the remaining stabilizing compound he'd synthesized for Nari. This should help for now, but we need a more permanent solution. He looked at her with concern. And we need to figure out how they found you. Nari sat heavily on a worn sofa. For a moment, the regal princess facade cracked, showing the exhausted, frightened person beneath. They shouldn't have been able to track me across interstellar distances, she said. Unless what? She pulled out her communicator device. Unless there's a tracking beacon I missed, something dormant that activated when we started repairing this. Tae-hyun took the device, examining it with new suspicion. Can we disable it without damaging the communicator? Possibly. Her violet eyes met his. But even if we do, they know I'm on Earth now. They'll keep sending hunters until they find me. The gravity of their situation settled over them. This wasn't just about hiding anymore. They were being actively hunted by beings with technology far beyond Earth's defenses. Then we need to change our approach, Taehyun said, determination replacing fear. Instead of just hiding, we need to fight back. Fight back against Imperial hunters. Nari looked skeptical. With what? Taehyun smiled slightly. With human ingenuity. Your people may have advanced technology, but we're pretty good at thinking outside the box. He started drawing on a piece of paper. They're expecting us to run and hide. Let's give them something they're not expecting. As they huddled over the table, planning their next move, the distant sound of a helicopter broke the night's silence, searchlights sweeping the forest below. The hunt was intensifying, but for the first time since the hunters had appeared, they had something else too. A plan. Dawn broke over the forest surrounding Minho's cabin, casting long shadows through the windows. Taehyun hadn't slept. Instead, he'd worked through the night, disassembling the hunters' damaged neural processors they'd managed to salvage during their escape. These components are incredible, he murmured, examining a crystal chip no larger than his fingernail. It's like they're partially organic. Nari looked up from her own work, repurposing the tracking beacon from her communicator. They are, grown rather than manufactured. It's how we achieve quantum coherence at room temperature. The week since their encounter with the hunters had been a blur of activity. They'd narrowly escaped 3 more tracking teams, each time using Taehyun's increasingly clever traps to disable the pursuers long enough to escape. Each encounter provided more salvaged technology, which they used to enhance their makeshift transmitter. I think it's ready, Nari said, connecting the final wire to their cobbled-together device. It looked strange. Alien crystals merged with Earth electronics, all housed in an old microwave oven Taehyun had gutted. Taehyun wiped sweat from his forehead. Are you sure this will reach your people? The loyal ones, I mean. The resistance. Movement has been waiting for my signal. She touched the royal insignia she always kept close. This frequency is known only to those sworn directly to my family line. They carried the device outside, away from the cabin's metal roof that might interfere with the signal. The morning air was cool and damp, birds singing obliviously to the E. Interstellar drama unfolding beneath them. Ready? Taehyun asked. Nari nodded, taking a deep breath before pressing the activation sequence. The device hummed to life, its center glowing with an unearthly blue light, the same color that sometimes shimmered beneath Nari's skin. Broadcasting now, she said. Message encoded with royal identifiers. They stood in tense silence as the transmitter sent its plea for help across unimaginable distances. After 5 minutes, the light dimmed. Now we wait, Nari said quietly. How long? If anyone received it, hours, perhaps a day. She looked up at the morning sky. If no one received it. She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. They returned to the cabin and spent the day preparing defenses. They'd learned from previous encounters that the hunters could track Nari's unique energy signature, so staying mobile was their best strategy. Still, they needed rest eventually. Taehyun had rigged early warning systems using motion sensors from the university physics lab. He'd also prepared several more electromagnetic pulse devices using the principles that had worked against the first. Hunters. They adapt quickly, he reminded Nari. Each trap only works once. As evening approached, Taehyun found Nari standing by the window, watching the sunset with an expression he couldn't read. Something wrong? He asked, joining her. I was thinking about home, she said softly. The light here is different. Your single sun makes everything simpler somehow. Clearer shadows. Do you miss it? Your home? She was quiet for a moment. I miss what it was. Before the coup. She turned to him. My whole life was planned out. Education, diplomatic service, eventually taking the throne. Then suddenly I'm here, learning things no royal education ever covered. Like what? Like how to fix a coffee maker, she said with a small smile. Or how humans celebrate birthdays. Or how someone who has never met me would risk everything to help me. Taehyun felt his face warm. Anyone would have... No, she interrupted gently. Not anyone, just you. The moment hung between them, filled with words neither was ready to say. Then the perimeter alarm beeped softly, breaking the spell. Taehyun, rushed to check the monitors. Movement in the trees, 3 signatures. Hunters. No, different energy pattern. He adjusted the settings, frowning at the readings. Much stronger. Whatever they are, they're not trying to hide. Nari's eyes widened. "The resistance," she breathed. "They received my message." They hurried outside, just as 3 figures emerged. From the forest. Unlike the hunters, these beings made no attempt to appear human. Tall and elegant, their skin had a subtle iridescence that caught the fading sunlight. They wore what appeared to be armor, though it moved like fabric. The leader stepped forward and dropped to one knee before Nari. "Your Highness," he said in a melodic language Taehyun couldn't understand. "We have found you at last," Nari responded in the same language, her posture transforming before Taehyun's eyes. Gone was the uncertain refugee. In her place stood a princess, regal and commanding. After a brief exchange, she turned to Taehyun. "This is Commander Ilan. He leads what remains of the Royal Guard." Her voice was thick with emotion. "They've been searching for me since the coup." Taehyun nodded awkwardly to the kneeling alien. Hi, I'm Taehyun." Commander Ilan rose, regarding Taehyun with curious eyes that shifted color like opals. "The princess tells me you saved her life. The Empire owes you a debt, human." "I just did what anyone would do," Taehyun said, feeling suddenly very small and very human. "He is being modest," Nari interjected. "Without his help, I would have been captured or died weeks ago." The commander bowed slightly to Taehyun, an unexpected show of respect. "Then we are fortunate indeed." Inside the cabin, they gathered around the table as Commander Ilan updated Nari on the situation at home. The resistance had grown stronger, with many planetary systems rejecting General Dawn's authority. The king and queen were alive, but imprisoned. "We have gathered enough forces to challenge Dawn," Ellen explained. "But we need the rightful heir to unite the people." Nari listened intently, asking sharp questions about military positions and political alliances. Taehyun watched her, realizing this was the role she had been trained for her entire life. "Our ship is hidden beyond your moon," Ilan continued. "We can depart immediately, Your Highness." The word "depart" hit Taehyun like a physical blow. Of course she would leave. That had always been the plan. "Why did it suddenly feel so wrong? I need a moment," Nari said, rising from the table. She gestured for Taehyun to follow her outside. Under the stars, she turned to face him. "I have to go," she said quietly. "I know." He tried to smile. "You have a rebellion to lead, an empire to save. Pretty important stuff." "Taehyun," she took his hands in hers. "These past weeks I've learned more about courage and kindness than in all my royal education. You showed me that my people's understanding of humanity is deeply flawed." "We have our moments," he said, trying to keep his voice light, despite the ache in his chest. "Come with me," she said suddenly. "What?" "Come with me," she repeated, more confident now. "My people need to understand humans better. Who better to teach them than you?" Taehyun stared at her, stunned. "Me? Go to space? To an alien empire? You said yourself that human thinking is different, creative, adaptable. Those qualities saved me more than once." Her violet eyes were earnest. "My people need that perspective, especially now." "But what about my studies, my family?" "I cannot promise when you might return," she admitted. "The journey itself takes time, but I can promise that you would see wonders beyond imagination. And," she hesitated, "I would have a friend I trust beside me." Friend. The word seemed simultaneously too much and not enough. Taehyun looked up at the night sky, stars glittering, like possibilities. His whole life he dreamed of what might exist among those distant lights. Now an actual princess from among those stars was asking him to see them up close. "My thesis advisor is going to be really confused when I don't show up for our meeting next week," he said with a small laugh. Nari's face brightened. "You'll come?" "How could I not?" he replied. "Someone has to make sure you don't forget everything you learned about us primitive humans." She smiled, really smiled, the kind that transformed her entire face. "I need to tell Ilan we'll depart before dawn to avoid detection." As she turned to go back inside, Taehyun caught her hand. "Nari, wait. What happens when we get there? To your world?" "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "I must take my place as leader of the resistance. There will be challenges, perhaps fighting. And after? If you win?" She understood his real question. "After, there will still be a place for you, I promise." She squeezed his hand. "Perhaps as a royal advisor on human affairs." "I'd prefer friend of the princess," he suggested. "That, too," she said softly. As dawn approached, they stood with the royal guard at the edge of the forest. A beam of light descended from the sky, encircling them. "Ready?" Nari asked, now fully restored to her royal appearance. The human disguise no longer necessary. Taehyun took one last look at the earth. The trees, the cabin, the rising sun. Everything he had known. Then he turned to the alien princess, who had crashed into his ordinary life and made it extraordinary. "Ready?" he said, taking her hand as the light grew brighter around them. Together they ascended toward the stars, leaving behind one world and heading toward another that would never be the same once humanity's perspective arrived on its shores.